Scary deep woods stories. I found a cabin that wasn't on any map. I wasn't supposed to be there. The ranger at the trailhead made that clear when he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Stay on the marked paths, no shortcuts, no exploring." But I've always been the kind of person who needs to see what others avoid. I was in upstate New York, deep in the Adirondacks, trying to disconnect from the digital noise of modern life. No phone, no laptop, just me, my backpack, and a weekend of hiking. The first day went smoothly, just trees, the occasional squirrel, and the crunch of leaves under my boots. But on the second day, the trail markers started disappearing. I assumed I'd taken a wrong turn. I was about to double back when I saw something through the trees, a rooftop. Not just any roof, but an old wooden cabin hidden behind thick brush, moss growing over the shingles, chimney cracked. It wasn't on any of the trail maps I'd studied. My curiosity got the better of me. I forced my way through the undergrowth and approached. The windows were smeared with something dark, but inside I could see furniture, chairs, a table, a lit oil lamp, literature. My breath caught. Someone was in there. I knocked. No answer. I tried the door. It creaked open. The cabin smelled of rot and something older. Wet wood, maybe. The air was thick. On the table was a journal, open, the last entry written in frantic, slanted handwriting. If you're reading this, it's too late. It's under the floor. I backed up and froze. The floorboards beneath my feet groaned. Something scraped underneath. I spun around and ran. I don't know how far I got before I realized I was completely turned around. I tried my compass, spinning in circles, no signal, no way out. That night, I set up camp under a dead tree, but sleep wouldn't come. From somewhere in the dark, I heard it, scraping, like nails against wood. Then breathing, slow, heavy, right outside the tent. I held my breath. Whatever it was didn't move like an animal. It circled my tent 3 times before everything went silent. When I woke up, the tent was untouched, but there were muddy handprints all over the outside. Human hands with fingers too long. I packed my things and walked for hours, hoping to find the trail again. Instead, I found the cabin, same place, same angle. But this time, the door was already open, and the journal on the table had a new entry. "Why did you come back?" I didn't want to go inside. Everything in my gut screamed to turn around, to run even if I had no idea where I was heading. But some twisted part of me needed to know more. Maybe it was desperation or curiosity. Maybe it was something else entirely. I stepped through the doorway again. The oil lamp was still burning, exactly as before, its flame frozen in time. The air was thicker now, heavier, like walking into a dream you can't wake up from. The journal sat open, and the words, "Why did you come back?" had been underlined 3 times in what looked like fresh blood. My mouth went dry. I didn't remember seeing any wounds on myself, but when I reached out to touch the page, I noticed a smear of blood across my forearm. Fresh, but I felt no pain. I closed the journal and took another look around. The cabin was impossibly silent. I hadn't noticed it before, but there were no sounds of the forest. Not a bird, not a breeze, not even my own breathing. I moved to the far wall where a large patch of the floor looked newer than the rest, as if someone had recently torn up the original boards and replaced them hastily. I knelt down and ran my fingers along the seam. A sudden cold shot through my fingertips. Then I heard it, a voice, faint and hoarse, from below. "Help me, please." My blood turned to ice. I stood frozen, staring at the floor. Again the voice whispered, "Down here. They buried me. But I'm not dead. Not yet." I backed away slowly, but before I could turn, the front door slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. I lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Something was holding it shut from the outside, or maybe from the inside. Then the scraping began again, this time louder, more frantic, directly beneath my feet. I stumbled back, and the boards beneath the table began to rise, as if being pushed up from underneath. A filthy hand with twisted fingers emerged from the crack. Then an arm, then the top of a head, hair matted with blood and dirt. I screamed and threw my entire weight against the door until it finally burst open. I ran blindly through the trees, thorns tearing at my clothes, my face, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs felt like they were bleeding. Finally, I collapsed at the edge of a creek and passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up, it was night again. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. The forest was still and wrong. The moon hung too low in the sky, almost red, casting warped shadows between the trees. I tried to retrace my steps using landmarks, but every direction looked the same. Eventually, I found a trail, new, well-worn, and clearly not the one I had come in on. I followed it for over an hour, hoping it would lead me out. That's when I saw the light again. The same cabin, same angle. Only this time, someone was standing in the doorway, and they were waving at me, slowly, as if they'd been expecting me all along. I should have run. I should have turned around and disappeared into the woods no matter what direction they led. But I didn't. Something about the figure in the doorway held me there. I couldn't make out their face, only the silhouette, a tall, thin outline that seemed to flicker like a flame, unstable, shifting with each blink of my eyes. My legs moved on their own. I stepped forward, drawn in like a moth to a flame I couldn't see. The air grew colder with each step, and the sounds of the forest faded until I could only hear my own breath, ragged and shallow. As I got closer, the figure stepped back inside, and the door remained open, as if inviting me in. I hesitated on the threshold, staring at the dark interior that looked nothing like what I remembered. The furniture was gone. No lamp, no journal, just shadows, deep, endless shadows. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me again, and I was swallowed by darkness. A voice whispered from the far corner, "You've seen too much." I spun toward it, heart hammering in my chest. My flashlight, which had refused to work earlier, now flickered to life on its own. I aimed it at the corner, but there was nothing there. Then came the sound, laughter, childlike, echoing in unnatural patterns around the cabin, bouncing from wall to wall like it had no source. I tried to leave, but the doorknob twisted in my hand without budging. My flashlight flickered again and revealed something scrawled across the inside walls of the cabin. Hundreds of names written in a shaky, frantic hand. And then, at the very bottom, my name, fresh, still wet. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, stumbling into something soft. I turned. It was the couch. It had returned, but now it was soaked in something thick and red. My flashlight dimmed again. The laughter turned into sobbing. From beneath the floor, the boards began to swell and pulse like a heartbeat. I screamed. Suddenly, the walls collapsed outward into a void. Nothing but blackness where trees should have been. The cabin floor splintered beneath me, and I fell, plummeting through air that felt like liquid, surrounded by whispers. When I hit the ground, it wasn't solid. It was like flesh, warm, breathing. I scrambled to my feet, but the world around me had changed. The forest was gone. I was in a field of twisted trees, each one dripping with something thick. In the center stood a figure, its head twitching violently. It raised a hand and pointed at me. I turned and ran again, but there were no paths, no direction, just endless woods and the growing sense that I was being watched, chased, hunted. The whispers were no longer distant. They were in my ears, in my mind. They knew me, knew everything about me, and they weren't letting me go. I wandered through the night in that surreal version of the woods, where time no longer moved in a way I could measure. My legs ached and my throat burned, but I pressed on because the only other option was to stop and let whatever was following me catch up. The trees were no longer trees. They bent unnaturally, their branches curling like claws, their bark peeling off in long, leathery strips that seemed to pulse with life. I heard voices from the trunks, whispers in 100 languages I didn't understand, all of them calling to me, luring me deeper. I tried not to look at them, but once, just once, I did, and I saw a face in the bark, not carved, alive, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream, the skin fused into the wood as if it had been absorbed. I vomited and ran until I couldn't anymore. That's when I saw the firelight. Not a cabin this time, a campfire, flickering between the trees, and beside it, a man, An old man in a tattered parka, sitting on a log roasting something over the flames. He looked up at me and smiled like he'd been expecting me. "You made it," he said. I didn't respond. My body wanted to run, but my legs locked. He gestured for me to sit. Against every instinct, I did. He handed me something on a stick. I didn't want to take it, but hunger gnawed at me like a beast. I took one bite and spat it out. It was meat, but not any animal I could name. It tasted wrong. The texture was off. He laughed. "Only way to keep them from finding you," he said. "Eat the woods, become the woods. Otherwise, they hunt you forever." He leaned in. His eyes were pure black. Not like a lack of color, like voids, endless holes that led nowhere. He whispered, "They already marked you. The cabin? It's not a place. It's a trap. It waits for people like you, curious ones, wanderers. Once you enter, it remembers. It follows." I asked him what he meant. He looked around nervously. "It's close. You feel it?" I didn't. Not at first. But then a wind blew through the trees, and it wasn't cold. It was hot, like breath. And it carried with it a sound. Creaking wood, dragging feet, the low hum of something ancient. The man grabbed my arm. "Don't sleep, no matter what. If you sleep, it finds the doorway. It comes through." Then he stood up and walked into the dark, vanishing without a sound. I stayed by the fire, shaking, too afraid to close my eyes. But at some point, exhaustion won. I drifted into half sleep, and that's when it happened. I saw the cabin again, but not like before. I was inside it, lying on the table. My chest was cut open. Figures stood over me, not human. They had no eyes, only slits for mouths, and they whispered words that made my bones vibrate. They reached into me and pulled out something black and writhing. I woke up screaming. The fire was dead. The woods were silent. And beside me was the stick of meat, half eaten. But the bite I remembered spitting out was gone. My hands were covered in something wet. I checked my body, no cuts. But I felt lighter, wrong, like something had been taken. I stood and stumbled through the forest again. Eventually I saw a clearing. Daylight. Real, golden daylight. Birds singing. Normal trees. I cried. I ran toward it. I broke through the last of the brush and emerged onto a dirt road. A truck was parked there. A man stood beside it, talking on a CB radio. He looked up and saw me and rushed over. "You all right?" "Jesus, you look like hell." I sobbed and nodded. He loaded me into the truck, gave me water, and asked where I'd been. I told him. His face went pale. "There's no cabin out here," he said. "Not for miles. And if you went off trail like you said, you're lucky to be alive. People go missing out here all the time." I begged him to take me to the nearest town. He did. A ranger station. They gave me a blanket, made me fill out forms, asked me to draw where I'd gone. When I sketched the path and the cabin's location, the ranger looked at it and said, "That's not possible. That area was burned out 20 years ago. Nothing's lived there since." But I knew. I knew it was still out there. And I knew something came back with me. That night, in the motel they put me up in, I heard it again. The creaking, the whisper, the journal on the nightstand, my journal, was open to a new page. 5 words written in shaky ink. "You shouldn't have left it." That night I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time my eyes shut for more than a blink, I saw the cabin, those eyeless figures, the flickering oil lamp that somehow burned forever. I tried everything to distract myself, counting, humming, even stabbing my own arm lightly just to stay awake. But by dawn, I was breaking. The motel room that the Rangers had set me up in felt smaller with every passing minute, the walls tightening around me, the air growing heavy and metallic. The moment the sun peeked through the blinds, I fled. I didn't check out. I didn't look back. I needed answers. I needed to know if I was going insane. I drove for miles with no destination, just a need to move. Eventually, I stopped at a diner, one of those old places with peeling wallpaper and a waitress who's seen too much. She poured my coffee, asked no questions. But as I reached for the sugar, an old man in the booth behind me turned and said, "You saw the cabin, didn't you?" My blood ran cold. I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. He nodded. It's older than these trees, older than the dirt. It finds people who don't belong, who look too long, who ask too many questions. And once you see it, it sees you. He slid a folded map across the table. This isn't from the Rangers. This is what's really out there. I opened the map, hand-drawn, faded ink. It showed a network of trails and symbols I didn't understand. In the center, marked in red, was the cabin. But around it were others, X's, each one labeled with a date and a name. What are these? I asked. The old man's face tightened. People who never came back. Who got too close? I tried to press for more, but he stood and left, leaving his coffee half full. I should have left it alone. But the part of me that first stepped off the trail couldn't let it go. I studied the map for hours, tracing paths, trying to make sense of the markings. One location kept drawing my attention, a spot labeled the Echo Tree. It wasn't far from where the cabin should be. I packed my gear again. I told no one. I left a note at the motel in case I didn't return. I needed to go back. I needed to face it. The forest welcomed me like an old enemy. The trees were familiar now, but not comforting. They leaned in too close. The wind didn't blow. It whispered. I followed the map to the Echo Tree. I found it just before sundown. A massive oak, gnarled and wide, with a hollow so deep it could fit a man. Symbols carved all around its base. Eyes, spirals, crooked figures. I stepped closer and called out, "Hello!" My voice echoed back, but it wasn't my voice. It was younger. Terrified, it said, "Please don't leave me." I stumbled back. The tree groaned. Something inside shifted. And then I saw them, hands reaching from within the hollow. Thin, pale, fingers twitching. I ran. But as I turned, I heard it, the creak of a door swinging open. And I knew without seeing that the cabin was behind me again. I turned. There it was. But now it looked different. Older. Rotten. The roof had collapsed, but the oil lamp still flickered. Against all reason, I approached. This time I brought a crowbar. I pried the floorboards up. Beneath them I found a pit, a hole that dropped into pure darkness. And from it, a voice rose. Mine. My own voice screaming for help. I dropped the crowbar and fell to my knees. Something below was laughing. Not loudly. A quiet, intimate chuckle. I felt breath on my neck. I turned. No one. But when I looked down again, something had climbed halfway out of the pit. It was me, or something wearing my face, but its eyes were empty, its mouth too wide. It crawled toward me. I ran. I don't remember how far. I only know that when I stopped, I was at the trailhead. My car was still there, but my keys weren't. The driver's side window was down. Inside, written on the rearview mirror in condensation, were 5 words. Next time, you stay forever. I didn't go home after that. I couldn't. Something had followed me, a stain in my shadow, a second breath behind mine. Even in daylight, my reflection seemed delayed, slightly off, as if it had to catch up to my movement. I booked a cheap cabin far away, hundreds of miles south, deep in the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania. I didn't tell anyone. I left my phone in a bus station locker 3 towns over. I thought if I could isolate myself, maybe I could shake whatever was tethered to me. But the forest doesn't forget, not the Adirondacks, not the Alleghenies, not even the soil under your feet. I barely slept my first 2 nights. I thought I saw eyes in the trees, not animal eyes, too level, too knowing. On the 3rd night, I built a fire and sat with my back to a large boulder. No dreams, no sounds, just the crackle of burning wood and the occasional hoot of an owl. But at 3:14 a.m., I remember the time because my watch had stopped ticking the moment the fire went out. I heard something familiar. A voice. Mine. "Let me in." It came from behind the boulder. My voice, perfectly mimicked, but stripped of emotion. Hollow. I didn't respond. I didn't move. "Let me in," it repeated, closer this time. I threw a log in the direction of the voice, but it passed through nothing. Then silence, and then breathing, right beside me. I turned to look and saw nothing But the trees all around had shifted. Closer. The boughs bent inward like claws. Something was changing. The woods weren't just alive. They were aware. The next morning, I decided to hike away from the cabin and try to find a ranger station. I needed help. But halfway through the hike, I passed a tree with a carving. My initials. Fresh. Bleeding sap. I had never carved it. Beneath it was another set, MW 1912. I didn't know what it meant. I kept walking, but the trees repeated themselves. I passed the same rock formation 5 times. I should have been heading straight, but I was looping, trapped. And then I saw something ahead, something impossible. A man, wearing the same jacket I was wearing, same building, same boots, walking with the same limp I'd picked up days earlier. I hid behind a tree. He turned suddenly and looked in my direction. Not like he sensed me, like he remembered me. He whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he smiled, wide, too wide, and he ran. I chased him. Stupid, I know. But I needed answers. He darted through the woods like he knew every tree, every dip in the ground. Eventually, I lost him. But I stumbled into a clearing I hadn't seen on any map. In the center was a tree, dead and hollow, filled with bones, human bones, arranged like a nest. And on top of them was a journal. Mine. The one I'd left in the Adirondacks. I picked it up, shaking. The last page was filled with scrawl. "You're not you. You're not you. You're not you." Over and over. I dropped it and turned to run, but there was someone behind me. The man again. But this time I saw his face clearly. It wasn't mine. It was what my face could have been. Longer, hollowed, wrong. He leaned in and whispered, "You're in my body now." I blacked out. When I woke up, the forest was gone. I was lying on a bed in a sterile white room. A nurse was talking softly to someone behind a curtain. I tried to sit up. My muscles were slow, heavy. My limbs didn't move the way I remembered. When the nurse saw me awake, she screamed. People rushed in. A doctor, a security guard. They called me by a name I didn't recognize. They said I had been found days ago in the woods, raving in an old dialect, wearing clothes from the early 1900s. They said I had no ID. They said my fingerprints matched a man who died over 100 years ago. But the worst part, when they showed me a mirror, I saw a face I'd never seen before. It wasn't mine. Not anymore. The mirror mocked me. Every time I looked into it, the face staring back was a stranger's. Gaunt, with sunken eyes that seemed to flicker as if lit from inside by something not entirely human. The staff at the psychiatric facility believed I had suffered a complete break with reality. They spoke softly around me, treated me like I was fragile, but behind their eyes I saw it. Fear. One night, while pretending to sleep, I heard the nurses whispering in the hallway. "He doesn't age," one said. "That man hasn't changed since he was admitted." Another added, "You mean since 1923? But that's impossible. No one lives that long." That's when I understood. They thought I was the man from the journal, the one who carved MW into the tree in 1912. Somehow the entity in the woods hadn't just stolen my body. It had implanted me into someone else's history, someone already claimed by the forest. My identity was rewritten, my past overwritten, but I remembered. I remembered the truth, and that made me dangerous. I started pretending I didn't. I let the therapist think I was making progress. I even repeated their names like affirmations. Dr. Thompson, Nurse Eliza. "I understand. I'm safe now." They bought it. On the 15th day, they left my door unlocked. I waited until 3:14 a.m., the time everything always begins, and slipped out. The halls were lit dimly, and every clock I passed was stopped at 3:14. I reached the records room. Inside, I found a dusty file labeled Michael Warren. Black and white photos paper-clipped to the file showed me, or the version of me I now inhabited, standing in front of the same cursed cabin, dated August 1912. The entries described increasingly erratic behavior, speaking in unknown languages, drawing strange symbols on the walls, claiming to have seen himself die. One photo showed Michael Warren holding an axe, his eyes pure black. That wasn't me, but it was now my face. I fled. Into the woods again. Back into the only place that might understand me, even if it meant death. But the forest had changed. The air was thicker, time less stable. I walked for hours under a red sky, trees swaying in wind that didn't exist. I passed landmarks I'd never seen but felt familiar, like remnants of a forgotten life. A stone altar, a circle of totems carved with screaming faces. Then I heard the crying, a child's sobs echoing through the forest. I followed the sound to a clearing and saw a girl no older than 7, barefoot and shaking, her back to me. When I approached, she whispered without turning, "Don't touch me. He's inside you now." Before I could speak, she vanished. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, just gone. In her place was a mirror, ancient and warped, leaning against a dead tree. I looked into it. My reflection smiled. I didn't. The reflection stepped forward, pressing against the glass, as if trying to crawl through. I backed away, but the surface rippled like water. A hand reached out, my hand. Only it wasn't human. It was bone thin, skin stretched like wax, claws instead of fingernails. The reflection said in a voice that echoed in my skull, "This body isn't yours. It's mine again." Then I was pulled, not physically but mentally, torn backward through scenes I couldn't explain, burning forests, cults dancing around fires, a boy buried alive while chanting in tongues. I awoke in the dirt, hours later, covered in strange symbols carved into my arms. My voice was hoarse from screaming. A note pinned to my chest read, "You're one of us now. You always were." I tore it off and ran, but the trees leaned in, branches forming a tunnel, guiding me not away, but deeper in. The forest doesn't let go, not once it marks you, not when you've become its vessel. I kept walking, though I no longer had any real sense of direction. The forest felt endless, like it was bending around me with each step. The deeper I went, the more unnatural everything became. Trees with bark that pulsed like veins. Mushrooms the size of dinner plates glowing faintly in the dark. I began to hear whispers, not just behind me, but inside my ears, threading into my thoughts. They didn't speak a language I understood, yet somehow I knew what they meant. They were welcoming me, not kindly, more like claiming me. A rustling to my left made me turn sharply, and for a moment I saw movement, something tall, impossibly thin, and cloaked in shadow. I sprinted away, tripping over roots, branches clawing at my skin like skeletal fingers. Eventually, I collapsed in a clearing, surrounded by a perfect circle of black stones. The air was dead still. In the center was a fire pit, cold and unused. I laid there panting, my pulse roaring in my ears until I noticed something beneath the leaves. I brushed them away and uncovered dozens of small animal bones, each etched with runes. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, a sigil, and I'd seen it before, on my own chest, carved into my skin in that waking nightmare. I stood to leave, but the ground shifted beneath me. The stones began to hum, low at first, then louder, vibrating with some ancient energy. From the forest edge, a figure stepped into view. Not the tall, thin creature from earlier. This one looked human. A man, draped in old ranger gear, but his face was wrong, waxen, stretched too tightly, like a mask over something else. "You're on the inside now," he said. His voice sounded like dry leaves. "No cabin to run to. Only roots. Only hunger." I ran again, this time blindly, crashing through brambles and fog until the trees parted, and I stood before the cabin again. It looked older now, like decades had passed. Vines covered the roof. The front steps had collapsed, but I could still see the oil lamp inside, burning steadily, as if waiting for me. I didn't want to enter, but something tugged at me, like a hook in my spine pulling forward. I stepped inside. The air was colder than before. Time didn't move in the cabin. It sank. Every corner seemed deeper than it should have been, shadows stretching for miles. The journal lay open again. Another entry in the same frantic hand. "The forest feeds off belief. Don't think, don't remember, forget or be taken." I tried to tear the pages out, but they wouldn't rip. The journal screamed when I touched it, a shrill, high-pitched wail that burst my eardrums. Blood trickled from my ears. I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in a room that hadn't been there before. Stone walls, no windows, only a single wooden chair in the mirror. It was back. My reflection stood, smiling, but not mimicking me. It raised a hand, and I felt mine move involuntarily. It opened its mouth and spoke. "You're almost ready. He's almost finished with you." I screamed, and the room fell apart. Literally, the walls crumbled like paper, revealing an endless black void filled with trees made of bone and fog that whispered my name. I fell again, into darkness, into silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing outside the facility. Not the forest, not the cabin. The sky was clear, my body was clean. No carvings, no blood. I looked at the sign, Alder Heights Psychiatric Sanitarium, and something snapped. I had never left, or I had, and come back in a different way. Nurses ran out to greet me, shocked I was alive. "You vanished 3 years ago," they said. "No one survives the deep Glen Trail." But I knew. I hadn't survived. Not really. Something had let me go, or sent me back. In my pocket was a pine cone. Not unusual, except it was bleeding. That night I couldn't sleep. I turned over and saw writing on my arm in a familiar, frantic scrawl. "He's almost done dreaming. When he wakes, you'll be the forest." When dawn finally broke, the world outside felt irrevocably changed, as if the forest itself had shifted in the hours I'd been lost in that endless void. I awoke in a small, decrepit cabin I didn't recognize. Its windows shattered and floorboards groaning beneath my weight. The walls were scratched with symbols that pulsed faintly, a sickly blue light flickering like a heartbeat in the dark. I tried the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it, trapping me inside with an oppressive silence that seemed to press against my eardrums. Hours blurred together, time fractured and warped by the forest's cruel influence. Suddenly, footsteps echoed just outside, soft at first, then louder, accompanied by a desperate whisper of my name. "Michael. Michael." My heart leapt. Someone was out there. Someone real. Someone who might save me. The door rattled violently as a wild-eyed woman burst inside, hair tangled and clothes torn from running through thorns and brambles. She grabbed my arm with a fierce urgency and pulled me outside into the twisting labyrinth of trees. "I'm Lena," she gasped. "I've been trapped here too. This forest, it's alive. It feeds on us, twists our minds, and holds us captive. You have to fight it." We ran blindly through the dense undergrowth, shadows moving unnaturally around us, stretching and coiling like living things. A low growl rumbled beneath the soil, a sound no animal should ever make, sending shivers down my spine. Lena pulled from her neck an ancient talisman carved with runes matching the symbols I'd seen in the cabin. "This keeps the darkness at bay, but only barely," she warned. Night fell, and we stumbled upon a clearing dominated by a black stone altar, surrounded by broken tools, rotted clothing, and faded photos of those the forest had claimed over the decades. Lena whispered stories of the deep glen, a cursed place, a gateway to a realm where restless spirits and terrible entities roamed free. Suddenly the wind died, and an unnatural silence enveloped us. From the shadows emerged the tall, thin figures I had glimpsed before, eyes glowing an eerie green, their chant rising in a language I couldn't understand, but felt deep in my bones. The air thickened, heavy and suffocating, as the forest tried to drag me into madness. Lena raised her talisman, light bursting forth in a desperate shield that pushed the creatures back. "Don't let it take you," she screamed, gripping my hand tight. I fought the creeping darkness, clawing at my mind, but the battle was losing ground. My reflection in a pool of water twisted into the ancient, terrible face of the forest itself, its eyes burning with hunger. Suddenly, Lena dragged me away, sprinting toward a narrow, barely visible path. We crashed through underbrush and thorn until the forest seemed to relent, and we burst into a moonlit field. But I knew this reprieve was only temporary. The deep glen never truly lets go. Collapsing onto the grass, gasping for breath, Lena looked at me with a fierce intensity. You must find the heart of the forest, she said. Destroy it before it destroys you, before it consumes all of us. I nodded, dread coiling in my stomach, knowing deep down the forest might have already claimed me in ways I couldn't yet see. The morning air was cold and sharp, biting through my clothes as Lena and I forced ourselves to our feet, eyes darting nervously toward the endless trees that loomed like silent sentinels around us. The field we had escaped to felt like a fragile island of safety, but the knowledge that the deep glen's grasp stretched far beyond was a weight pressing down on my chest. Lena's grip tightened on my arm as she whispered, "We need to move fast. The heart of the forest is deeper than anyone has dared to go. It's where the corruption started, and it's the only way to end this nightmare." We set off along a barely visible trail, tangled branches clawing at our faces and skin, each step heavier than the last, as if the forest itself tried to drag us back. The silence around us was suffocating, punctuated only by distant rustling and occasional, unsettling whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Hours turned into an endless march through darkness, but the trees gradually grew twisted and ancient, their bark thick and blackened like burnt flesh. Strange shapes flickered in the shadows, eyes watching, waiting. Suddenly, Lena stopped, pulling me behind a massive oak. Ahead lay a clearing where the ground was scorched and cracked, the air thick with a choking haze. At its center was a gnarled tree, grotesque and twisted, pulsating with a sickly green light that seemed to crawl beneath the skin of the forest. "This is it," Lena said, voice trembling. "The heart. It feeds on pain and fear. If we destroy it, maybe the forest will release its grip." As we approached, the earth beneath us groaned, and shadows coalesced into humanoid figures with hollow eyes and mouths twisted in silent screams. They lunged, claws scraping bone. But Lena raised the talisman, light exploding outward in a blinding wave that forced them back. I drew a jagged shard of stone from the ground and charged toward the tree's base, hacking at the pulsating bark. The air filled with a wailing roar, a sound so pure and ancient it seemed to tear at reality itself. The forest convulsed, branches thrashing wildly, roots writhing like serpents. Pain exploded through my hands and arms, burning like acid. But I forced myself to keep cutting, to break through the unholy skin of this living nightmare. Lena screamed words in a forgotten tongue, the talisman glowing brighter than ever. The tree cracked, splintered, and with a final, earth-shaking roar, it shattered into 1,000 fragments, each exploding into a burst of dark smoke and twisted screams. The forest fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting like a curtain being drawn back. The shadows receded, and the air felt lighter, though the scars of the place remained etched deep into my soul. Lena collapsed beside me, exhausted but alive. "We did it," she whispered, though the fear in her eyes told me the fight was far from over. As dawn's first light pierced through the broken canopy, I realized that some horrors once awakened never truly die. The deep glen was broken, for now, but its darkness would haunt me forever, a shadow lurking just beyond the edge of every tree. The first light of dawn filtered weakly through the shattered canopy above us, casting long, fragile beams across the forest floor. The air, once heavy with a suffocating darkness, now felt lighter but carried an eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. Lena and I lay on the ground, breath ragged, bodies trembling from the night's ordeal. But even as the forest seemed to release its grip, a gnawing unease settled deep within me. We had destroyed the heart of the forest, yes, but the shadows clung stubbornly to every corner, whispering promises of return and vengeance. Slowly we pushed ourselves to our feet, knowing that surviving the night was only the beginning. As we moved cautiously through the clearing, the remnants of the broken tree lay scattered like the bones of some ancient beast, still pulsing faintly with residual energy. Lena's talisman hung limp around her neck, its light flickering weakly, a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. "We need to find a way out," I said, voice hoarse. "This place, it's still alive, and I'm not sure it's finished with us." The path back was obscured, the forest's maze-like grasp twisting the terrain into an ever-changing puzzle designed to trap lost souls forever. Each step forward felt like walking deeper into a waking nightmare. Suddenly, from the distance came a low, mournful cry that sent shivers down my spine. A sound not quite human, yet not fully beast, echoing through the trees like a death knell. Lena's eyes widened. "That's them," she whispered. "The lost. The ones the forest has claimed but never let go. They're waking." As we hurried along the narrowing trail, shadowy figures flickered at the edges of our vision. Glimpses of pale faces, empty eyes, twisted limbs reaching out like desperate hands. The air grew colder, the darkness denser, pressing in on us from all sides. We stumbled upon an abandoned campsite, remnants of another unfortunate group who had fallen victim to the deep glen. Tattered tents, a rusted lantern, a scorched map barely legible, their last desperate attempts to escape the forest's grasp. Among the debris, a journal lay half buried in the dirt, pages torn and stained but still readable. The entries told of increasing terror, strange phenomena, and a growing madness that devoured their minds piece by piece. The final entry was a frantic scrawl. "The forest whispers. It knows us. It wants us. Don't trust the light. It's a trap." Horror washed over me. The forest wasn't just a place. It was a predator, sentient and cunning, playing with its prey until they were broken. Lena clutched my arm tightly. "We have to keep moving. The deeper we go, the closer we are to breaking free. But the forest will throw everything it has at us." As twilight fell again, the sky darkening to an unnatural shade of purple and black, the forest seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. Trees groaned, branches twisted into snarling shapes, and unseen creatures skittered just beyond sight. Our breaths came in ragged gasps as fear clawed at our minds, memories of the night's terrors threatening to unravel our sanity. But the will to survive burned brighter than the shadows. Step by agonizing step, Lena and I pressed forward, chasing a fragile hope that the nightmare of the deep glen might one day end. Not just for us, but for all who had ever been lost within its deadly embrace. The deeper we pressed into the heart of the forest, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as though the very air had thickened with centuries of sorrow and rage. Every step felt like wading through invisible sludge, and the trees seemed to close ranks behind us, their gnarled branches twisting into grotesque shapes that reached out like claws, threatening to drag us back into the shadows. Lena's talisman, once a faint glow in the dark, now burned brightly against her chest, its ancient runes pulsing with a desperate energy that seemed to repel the forest's creeping corruption. But even its light could only hold back the darkness for so long. We stumbled upon a narrow ravine choked with tangled roots and thick moss, a place so silent and still that the absence of sound roared louder than any scream. From within the depths, a faint shimmering shimmer flickered. "A gateway," Lena said, "to the source of the forest's power, hidden in an ancient cavern sealed away long ago by those who understood the terrible evil lurking beneath." But the path was treacherous, and the air grew colder with every step as unseen eyes watched us from the shadows, waiting, calculating. As we descended, the walls seemed to close in, alive with whispers, voices from the lost, calling out in sorrow and warning. Lena clutched my arm tightly, her breath visible in the frigid air. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a chilling, guttural roar echoed through the cavern, shaking loose dust and debris. From the darkness emerged a colossal figure, a twisted amalgamation of bark and bone, eyes glowing with a malevolent fire. It was the forest's guardian, the last defense against intruders who dared to challenge the deep glen's dominion. Panic surged through me, but Lena stood firm, raising the talisman high. Light burst forth, clashing against the guardian's darkness in a battle that shook the very foundations of the cavern. The creature lunged, branches whipping like whips, but Lena's light held strong, and I found the courage to strike with the jagged stone shard, aiming for the glowing heart embedded in its chest. The beast howled in rage and agony, staggering back as cracks appeared along its wooden frame. With one final, desperate blow, the guardian shattered, collapsing into a heap of splintered wood and dust. The cavern was silent once more, but the victory was short-lived. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, an ancient spirit, its form shifting between human and tree, eyes deep pools of endless sorrow. You have come far, but the forest curse is not so easily broken, it intoned. To end this nightmare, you must confront the root, the source of the pain that feeds this land. Only then will the deep glen release its grip. Lena nodded, steeling herself for the final trial. Together we moved deeper into the cavern's heart, where the roots twisted into a massive, pulsating core of darkness and light, a living wound that bled the forest's torment into the world. As we prepared to face the unimaginable, a surge of fear and determination flooded me. This was the moment that would decide not only our fate, but the fate of every lost soul trapped within the deep glen's deadly embrace. As Lena and I stood before the massive pulsating root at the cavern's core, its dark veins throbbing with a sinister life force, the air grew thick with an almost tangible weight, a crushing despair that threatened to swallow us whole. The root was alive, a grotesque fusion of decayed wood and writhing shadows, feeding off centuries of pain, fear, and death. Its twisted tendrils reached out like hungry serpents, seeking to ensnare and consume any who dared approach. Lena's talisman blazed with blinding light, but even its power seemed fragile against the overwhelming darkness. We exchanged a glance, unspoken understanding passing between us. This was the final battle, the ultimate test of our will. Steeling ourselves, we stepped forward, every nerve screaming as the root lashed out, trying to drag us into its abyss. The cavern trembled, echoes of ancient screams reverberating through the stone walls. I gripped my shard of stone tightly, slashing at the root's thick bark while Lena chanted the protective incantations, her voice steady despite the terror gnawing at her heart. Each strike released bursts of dark smoke and haunting whispers, voices of the lost souls trapped within the forest curse, begging for release. The root fought back, tendrils wrapping around our legs, pulling us toward its suffocating core. Summoning every ounce of strength, Lena and I pushed back, the talisman's light piercing the shadows, burning away the darkness inch by inch. Time seemed to distort, minutes stretched into hours, as the battle raged between light and shadow, hope and despair. Finally, with a shattering roar, the root split open, its corrupted essence exploding into a cascade of shimmering dust that drifted upward and vanished into the cavern's depths. The oppressive weight lifted instantly, replaced by a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of pine and fresh earth. The forest outside began to breathe again, the trees straightening, the shadows retreating. The lost souls' whispers faded into peaceful silence, their torment finally ended. Lena collapsed into my arms, tears streaming down her face, relief and exhaustion mingling in a fragile smile. We had survived the deep glen's nightmare and broken its curse, but the scars it left would forever mark our souls. As we emerged from the cavern into the first true light of dawn, the forest no longer felt hostile, but alive with quiet hope, a reminder that even the darkest places can find healing. Our journey had ended, but the story of the deep woods would live on as a warning. Some places hold shadows that can consume you, but with courage and light, even the deepest darkness can be overcome.